Good morning. This is a reading from Whispers from Eternity, a book of prayer demands by Paramahansa Yogananda. This is prayer demand number 32. Make me anything, a Christian or a Hindu, anything to realize thee. Let me be Christian, Jew, Hindu, Buddhist, Mohammedan, or Sufi. I care not what be my religion, race, creed, or color, if only I can win my way to thee. But let me be none of these, if that identity enmeshes me in an enclosing net of religious or social formalities. If I am traveling on some bypath of religion, lead me onto the one common highway of realization which leads straight to thee. Send me the sunshine of thy wisdom, that it lead me to the morning of my growing powers, and send me the moon of thy mercy to guide me rightly if ever I am lost in the dark night of sorrow. When I read this reading yesterday, the first thing that came to my mind was that in some way, and I think this is truth, though I said it a little more glibly than I'll say it now after some hours of contemplation, I thought, well, Swamiji's certainly preaching to the choir here. And in a way, that's really true, because what he's speaking about in this teaching, what Jesus is speaking about, is so central to this path of self-realization. It's just the essence of what we learn. I mean, Yogananda himself came to really talk about true Christianity and true yoga, and in fact, to show how those teachings are similar. It is just the essence of our path. On further reflection, I realized it was a little more complex than that, though that part of it remains simple, again, because we've had this amazing blessing from Swamiji. I didn't have a copy of Rays of the One Light, which is the book that Lahari read from with me last night. So I opened the New Path to reread the story that Swamiji relates here, when he said Master went to the movies with some of his disciples, and the story about Gyandev. And then he says to this disciple, why compare? Anybody who's speaking the truth, they're speaking truth, which is eternal and infinite, and why compare teachers? But when you open the book to that page, the first line right above that story says, Swamiji opens the book this way: to all sincere seekers, whatever his chosen path. To all sincere seekers, whatever his chosen path. That's who he dedicates the book to. Somehow last night it just struck me when Swamiji was writing this book decades ago, but even long before he wrote the book, I'm sure, he knew that. He understood that what he was going to write, or what he had written, truth is truth. It has nothing to do with the path one chooses, because these great teachers come in one after another, and many of them return many times. I mean, we're told that 3 of the gurus in our line of gurus were the 3 wise men. And then they came back in the 1800s. They just keep returning, and they just keep showing us the truth. And whoever can hear it in the moment hears it, and who can't hear it doesn't. They don't try to own that truth, and they don't try to make it theirs, and they don't ever tell us that it has to do with any particular religion. In fact, quite the contrary. Master came, as I said, when he came to the West, he came to teach us or show us Sanatan Dharma. Sanatan means truth, and Dharma, of course, means duty. And in fact, it means that duty that will bring us closer to the truth. He didn't tell anybody that they had to be on a particular path or in a particular religion. I was listening to somebody speak a few weeks ago, and they were mentioning that Lahiri Mahashaya would give Kriya to people of all different religions. Of course, Yogananda did as well, really showing that person, the world, all of us, one can have a true experience of the self, no matter what path they're on. So what Swamiji does in this reading is really rather extraordinary. He starts out by just choosing that reading from the Bible and letting us hear that Jesus says, if they're not against us, they're with us. Meaning, whatever path they're on, as long as they're choosing God, then we are really all one and the same. And then Swamiji chooses that beautiful reading from the Gita, where he goes from that macro understanding of that, and he brings it down to this beautiful reading that then brings it very much to each individual soul and their particular karma. Truth never changes. Truth is one and eternal, we say every week. Realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. Truth is one, paths are many. Paths are many, but the goal is always the same. So for each individual, certainly for all of the great religions and all of the people who are meant to follow those religions, truth is one, paths are many. But in the most meaningful and profound way for each of us, truth is one, but each of our paths are unique, every one of us. And I want to come back to that reading in the Gita in just a little bit. I'd like to start where Swamiji starts. There are so many stories which speak to this knowing, this truth, that when people are seeking truth, we tend to find each other. We tend to know long before I would have had any idea. I certainly couldn't have written that statement that Swamiji wrote, to all sincere truth seekers, whatever his path. I just wouldn't have known that until I heard Swamiji say it, until I heard Swamiji say so much to me about Master's teachings. But without knowing it, I have had, as I'm sure many people have, so many experiences of meeting someone in that truth or reading stories about it. I've been talking a lot recently about my son-in-law, who right now is transitioning between life and death. And I've mentioned before that I've known him for 20 years, and we've never spoken about religion or spirituality. But the first time that I drove to Los Angeles, once we knew the diagnosis, I asked him that night, where are you with regard to any religion or spiritual understanding? And he said to me, I have great faith. He said, I'm a Christian. And we never discussed any of this. Never. I mean, I mentioned this before. I know I did. They know that I'm a minister. They know that my whole life is in and around the teachings of this path in Ananda, but never once have they asked a question. But he said to me, I'm a true Christian, but not in the way you would think. So I said, without my telling you what I would think, what does that mean to you? He was a man who was born and raised in a tiny little town in Georgia. I think there might have been a few hundred people in this town, and those few hundred and everybody in the surrounding area were Protestant, and they were mostly fundamentalists and literalists. You know, they just took the Bible literally. So he said to me, I don't discuss religion with my friends. He said, I discovered the Gospel of Thomas when I was very young, and it really spoke to me. Well, I went up that night and I read the Gospel of Thomas, and I read a few things about that gospel, and honestly, it's the teachings of this path. Part of why Thomas never made it into the Bible is probably for this reason. He talked a lot about, for people who could truly hear Jesus, he quoted many of the quotes that Master quotes to us. He's a self-realizationist. And I said that to him the next day. And we have not spoken about religion since. Now we're 4 months later. But we have these profound experiences every time we're together now. We sit in silence. The first time he put his hand on the bed, and I had to realize he wanted me to reach out to him. Now he just takes my hand, and after he's asked me some medical questions, we just stay in silence. And then he says to his wife, he said, it's only when Shanti's here that I feel deeply calm. But he and I know it's not about Shanti. It's about meeting in that place of truth. It's about having no question. He's a Christian, I'm a self-realizationist, and we find each other in that place where truth is one and eternal. I've always loved the story of St. Joseph of Cupertino, and again, it's been told many times because it's such a charming way to hear this exact lesson of today. Joseph of Cupertino was a Catholic who used to levitate. He would just go into these states of ecstasy and become just pure energy, and he would just be up off of his mat or his bed or the ground in no time. And this was of great concern to the Catholics of the time. They did not know what to make of it. They didn't want other people seeing it. It was like, good Catholic boys don't do such things. And I mean, I really mean that. So they locked him in a room. It's where he lived a large portion of the rest and end of his life. I've been in that room. It's very powerful. But he just couldn't stay on the ground, so they just put him in there. And one day, some man of authority in a governmental sense, I think, I don't remember what his position was, from Sweden, came to see Joseph. And they let him in, and Joseph said to him, should we pray? And this man said, of course. So Joseph took his hands, and he started praying, and before this Swede knew what was happening, Joseph started going up, and then, lo and behold, so did he. And they were both there, levitating. And this man said later, I went up a Protestant, but I came down a Catholic. You know, like, what was that? But that's what happens when you see the truth. there are just, as I say, endless stories about it. I remember not long after Pope Francis became the Pope, he was in this country, he spoke to Congress. It was a big deal. And I remember reading, there was a lot that happened in and around that would make for a very great class at some point, because the stories are all about the transformation that can happen. It has nothing to do with religion. But they did polls. They took a poll not long after Francis left. And 60-some% of people who were avowed atheists said they would do almost anything to spend time with the Pope. Because no matter what their mind was telling them, no matter where they were intellectually, truth is truth, and it calls to our heart, and it transforms us, and it has nothing to do with religion. These great saints come, and they know they leave us with the truth. They leave us with truth. And then they're gone, and the disciples get confused, and the disciples turn truth, and as Swamiji says so often, dogma, into dogmatism, and they say, only if you're part of this religion can you go to heaven, find God, in many different languages. It came to me last night. It's so poignant. Of course, everything Jesus said is so poignant. Of course it is. But when he was giving his Sermon on the Mount and he was delivering the Beatitudes, he said, "Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God." He didn't say, "Blessed are those who know me to be the one and only Son of God who died on the cross for your sins." He didn't say any of that. He said, "Blessed are the pure in heart." Padre Pio, Saint Francis, people who could not have been any different from where not only I was coming from, but many people who were in Italy with me on that trip when we went out to Padre Pio's place. I could hardly relate to, these dark old confessionals and just so much of it. I had no context for it. But I never wanted to leave. I didn't want to leave. And I couldn't wait to go back. I haven't, so I still can't wait to go back to Padre Pio's place, because truth was spoken there. There's a wonderful experience that we had. I say we. I actually had to leave Israel early, as many of you know, on this last pilgrimage because of an illness in my family. But having been a part of the group that arranged that pilgrimage, we had arranged for the group to spend time in the oldest city in Israel called Safat. And it's a city now that's filled, it was founded by groups of Kabbalists, and it's pretty much inhabited by them. This is the mystical branch of Judaism. Now, when you go to Israel, everybody in Israel, almost everybody, is very Jewish. But they're very Jewish in really different ways. There's the Orthodox Jews, there's the modern Jews, there's the secular Jews. None of them think the other group has it right, by the way. They don't make any more sense to each other in a certain way than we made to them. But I felt like the group should have an experience of Kabbalism because it's self-realization. The teachings are the same. I knew that, but very few people on the trip were Jewish, and I don't even know if many Jews knew that. So I came home early, but when the group spoke about their experience there, the thing that almost everyone spoke of as being a high point of the trip was their time that had been arranged with this Kabbalist, Avraham. Now, believe me, if they all sat down and tried to pray together or follow their customs, or why do you keep a kosher home, or just on and on. They wouldn't have two words to say to each other, but they spoke to each other heart to heart, soul to soul. They spoke through music. They spoke through Abraham's art, which all says God is one. This is what happens when you transcend the religion, the underlying religion, when you move beyond it. And literally, when you transcend it, it's good to start there. It gives us form, a way, a path, but it's not the goal. Nothing of what we do. Even the other night, I was giving a little talk to a group of people about this practice of one of the techniques that Yogananda and then Swamiji taught us, the Om technique. And I read a quote that Master of Masters, I didn't bring it with me because I wasn't thinking I was going to say it right now, but basically what Master said is so much of what we do is important. Of course it's important. He said chanting's important, praying important, meditating is important. He said, but don't be confused. They're all techniques to get us to the goal. And the goal is self-realization. The goal is cosmic consciousness. And it doesn't matter at all what religion you're a part of, or if you haven't found a religion. If you can find your way into your heart, if you can purify your heart, like we do this ceremony that we do every Sunday of purification, you will find truth. And then you will be one of the religion of the whole world. So many of Master's poems in his book Whispers are about this. The religion of the world is really that place of oneness in God. So let's not get confused, even on our own path. The techniques, most of us need the techniques to get there. But let's not mistake them for what it means to do it all heart wide open, all of our attention focused up as often as we can remember, because that's the goal. And this is such a meaningful part of this reading today, when Swamiji chooses this reading from the Gita, where Krishna's saying to Arjuna, it would be better to die, to lose this life trying to meet your own karma, than to have an easy path of it and succeed in somebody else's karma. Now, why does he say that? Why does he even say, give up your life? I thought a lot about this last night, and I realized, and then I went back and read much of what Swamiji's written about this reading in other places, and karma itself, and of course it all makes sense. And of course, once it comes to us, then you go, why didn't I get that before? Probably one of those times where many of you would say, she's just getting that. But in this way, I am just getting it. That every time we get lost and we get confused and we think that we're supposed to be fulfilling somebody else's karma, and we don't think of it that way, it gets more and more and more subtle as we go. And so we begin to think, geez, I'm on this path. Music was important. I need to become a singer. I have to sing in the choir, or I have to learn to lead chants because that's what this path is. We don't ask ourselves, is that mine? I have to start teaching because everybody teaches. Really? Are we all meant to be teachers? And I could go on and on, of course, as I'm sure you can. The spiritual path is not a competition. There's no winners and losers in that way. We are each running our own race. And our job is to practice being so deeply attuned to our guru that we can follow his guidance down our path, and that we put every bit of effort that we can into making that happen. This is what tapasya means, and it's work. It takes effort, but that's what we're here to do. It is that very effort that lets us make spiritual progress, not that which we can do effortlessly. Swamiji has this example, which I've read many times now in different places, where he said there can be somebody who's a beautiful singer. They just come in with the voice and the talent. Does that mean they should sing? Not necessarily. What if there's too much ego in it for them? Or how does all of this vary as we move through our lives? How do monks, all of whom want to know God, decide whether they should be contemplative or go out into the world and teach? Is one right and is one wrong? Absolutely not. The only thing that's right is dharma, our duty. And that duty is always, dharma always means that which takes us closer to God. There's an adorable story of Swamiji in a discussion with a man once, where the man was trying to convince him that his path was better, and he was trying to tell him why. And finally, Swamiji said to that man, let's assume for a minute that your path is better than mine. He said, I would never be happy on your path. I wouldn't have the inclination to even try it that way. So let me just say, I'm perfectly willing to take second best. It's such a beautiful little nugget of what we are all here to learn, only to be, again, to do whatever we need to do to find that attunement that's going to take us to God. It's easier to learn those first steps of not judging others on their path. It's easier to just find yourself in love, spiritually, devotion, to feel that when you're sitting in a confessional where Padre Pio has sat. Those things happen. That's what happened to that, I wouldn't say poor Swede, but he wasn't poor, of course, but to that Swedish man. He didn't know what he was coming for, and he had an experience of what I imagine was at least close to samadhi. If not samadhi, certainly it was uplifted. It's degrees and degrees and degrees more challenging as we turn that inward, because there's this broad spectrum, these broad generalities that's true on every path and for every person. Be kind, tell the truth, be serviceful, see the best in people. These don't harm other people to the best of your ability, although that gets pretty subtle down the road. But still, there's no religion in the world that wouldn't say those things. But to find your own path takes enormous courage. It takes so much of what Swamiji's written about in so many of his songs. Walk like a man, go on alone. Why was he telling us all of these? Why was he giving it to us in music so we could sing it over and over and over? There are no two individual souls that are exactly alike. There are as many different paths as there are souls, Master said. So let each of us dive deep with the prayer, the constant prayer. Master, come to me, show me my path. Help me to take that path then, and let me not be confused by this ego that wants to call me out and find ways that I think will bring more praise, more notoriety, even that we think it will bring us contentment. No, there's no contentment out there. There's no contentment on somebody else's path. Show me the way. Master, show me the way.
Dare to be different, dare to be free, dare to roam far like wind on the sea. Fly like a gull, soar high on the air. Be strong in your courage when others despair. Never in anger, never in haste. Go without pride, be never abased. Freedom is yours if freedom you give. To all give it freely, in freedom you'll live. Mountains that stand up tall to the sky tell us no dreaming is ever too high. Dare to climb boldly, brave that high peak. You'll never know failure if bravely you seek. Dare to be different, dare to be free. Dare to roam far like wind on the sea. Fly like a gull, soar high on the air. Be strong in your courage when others despair. Be strong in your courage when others despair.